But I'm really pleased to be running this month's session. We've got some great panelists who I'm going to introduce in just a second, but I'll just give you a heads up in terms of the agenda that we're going to be covering today. So opportunity now, whilst we're all live in the session, if you've not familiarized yourself with the chat function, the chat is generally in the middle, just to the left of your screen. And if you don't know where the chat's been, where have you been? I will continue to say that joke every time we do it. But please do share any useful links, any links to your websites, any useful information that comes out of the chat here. So if you've got good links or anything to it, please drop them into the chat and say hello to everybody. This is about bringing together people from the community and sharing useful ideas and best practice. So if you've got anything that you want to share, please do drop it into the links. I will caveat that with, this is not an opportunity to flog your wares and shove your products down people's throats. There's a different time and a place, a different platform for that. But if there is something of use, please do drop it in. And if you want to make connections with people outside of this, use it as a platform to network and have some great discussions. In terms of the panel today, we have the awesome Mark Walton from Sensei, who I will hand over to in a moment just to introduce himself. We've also got the lovely Joe Regan-Isles from the Sigma Financial Group, People Officer from Sigma. And I think I've included both Joe and Mark today because the theme for this month's Contact Center Network is around remote working, remote leadership, and how we support people through that process, because this isn't going away anytime soon. So we are still seeing people struggling, people still looking to adapt in a remote setting. So this is all about how we can kind of bring some of that great best practice from what Joe and Mark have seen in the industry and for what everybody else has kind of seen happen across the industry and share that with everybody. So if you have got any questions, Sarah, who is from the Minds Advisory Group, which is a charity that is dear to my heart, will be facilitating some of the chat today. So Sarah will be dropping you little notes throughout the session just to encourage you to surface any questions that you've got up to Sarah, and Sarah will then communicate with myself and we'll fire them off to either Joe or Mark. So if you put hashtag question and who's it for, either Joe or Mark, or indeed myself, then drop that into the chat and then Sarah will surface that up so that we all get an opportunity. At each point, what I'll probably do is maybe invite you to take yourself off mute and ask your question to one of the panelists. So we make this a bit of an interactive session. It's not just me firing a load of questions at people. It's about trying to get you the answers or the thoughts or the discussion points that you want to bring to this table. As ever, Fab Solutions is the business that I run, and it's me that's created the Contact Center Network. And each month we try and bring something from this almost triangular box here, is to say, right, these are the things that I focus on as part of my business, and it's some of the stuff that I'm passionate about, but we try and center some of the themes around each of these different quadrants, because ultimately we all want to deliver a great customer experience and a great employee experience for the people that work within the contact center. So this month's theme is right in that bottom right corner, all around leadership, development, and remote working. So creating the right infrastructure for our people to be able to do amazing activities. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over now to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to hand over to, well, let's come to Joe Regan-Isles first. Give yourself a little bit of an introduction, Joe, your experience so far, and what pearls of wisdom you can share with the group today.
Oh, thanks very much. So firstly, nice to meet you all. As Mark said, Gary said even, sorry. My name's Joe Regan-Isles. I'm the Group People Officer at Sigma Financial Group. So we're a BPO that specialises, in the energy sector and also in the debt management and collections, but we're looking to move into, other industries. So I joined 3 months ago. Prior to that, I was with another organisation, and I've got around 20 years HR leadership experience in the BPO space. So really excited to be joining you all today. Really pleased to be chairing this as well with Mark and Gary, and I look forward to any questions that you may have during this. So nice to meet you all.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joe. Lovely to have you. And Mark, let you do some introductions for yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Thanks, Joe. Good to see everyone on the call. So I'm the chief exec of a business called Sensei. Sonsei, for those that you don't know, it is we're a home working specialist. We've been, I think, the only home working specialist that employs all its staff in the UK for about the last 16 years we've been running. Up until April, we were a fairly niche business, you could say, but since April, we've become very mainstream. We have about 1,400 employees dotted around the UK and Ireland. Every single one of them works from home. They always have worked from home. In addition to that, we have created over those years technology platforms that enable home working in an optimal way, which we've been using ourselves. But about a year ago, very fortuitously, we productized those technologies, and we've been sending them out like mad over the last 7 months to help companies to homework in a much more secure, engaged, better way, we think. And then thirdly, we provide consultancy services. So we've been providing consultancies to a lot of big blue chip organizations over the last 18 months to help them get up and running. The ones that worked with us before April obviously experienced a lot less of a challenge through COVID, but we've been helping businesses and also doing a lot of sharing knowledge and attending a lot of sort of sessions like this to help best practice and get companies up and running with their own staff working from home. Not every company wants to outsource, so we work with people regardless of how they want to do it, whether they want to outsource it, use their own people on our technology, or just get some advice for doing it. And obviously any questions that you have today around home working that I can help with, I'll do my absolute best to do so.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Mark. So the idea for today is you guys come up with some of the questions, not necessarily Joe and Mark, they can answer their own questions, but if anybody has any burning platforms, any challenges, any thoughts, or any kind of issues with how we're tackling the remote working environment, what the future of the landscape is going to look like, now is an opportunity to drop those into the chat, and Sarah will help coordinate those and try and bring you into the group so we can fire the questions directly to the panelists. But in advance of that, I've done my homework, and I've here in true Blue Peter fashion. Here's some I prepared earlier. So I've got a few questions just to start the ball rolling. Just kind of to understand, I suppose, Mark and Joe, how the landscape has changed within your environment. So can I ask, with your kind of each respective industries, how has COVID and the kind of the environment that we've been working within the past 6 months, how has it affected how you guys work and what you're seeing in the environment currently? So I'll come to Joe first. How's it affected you and your teams?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Gary. So I think over the last 6 months, you know, for us as a business, you know, we've got a majority of our employees are either in Birmingham, Redditch or South Africa. So we've just got about 1,800 employees altogether. So our employees in South Africa, you know, are working in the office, which is really good, very safely. And in Birmingham and Redditch, you know, we've got a small team working in Birmingham and Redditch, but the majority of our people are actually working safely at home. So I guess for us, it was very much a, you know, one moment, you know, people were working happily away in the office and commuting into work. And then the next time they're all working at home. So unlike Mark, who his business is predominantly has always been home working, it was a very big change for our group. And also from a HR leadership, before I joined this organisation, I was also very involved in a large TUPE transfer. So I started my journey with the TUPE in January, and then in March it was suddenly remotely. So I think both from a HR leadership skill and from a business point of view, you know, for us, it's been a massive change. So I'll be interested in from Mark's point of view, because he's been doing this for so long.
Yeah. So what a wonderful segue into Mark. How has it been for you and your teams, and have you experienced anything different?
I think really the big change has been volume for us. So we were obviously clearly ready, set up. This is what we do. So we do absolutely everything remotely. So we recruit, train, deliver, manage. Everything is remote. And so what we saw in the first couple of weeks of lockdown was a lot of our existing clients, they actually needed additional capacity, because everybody that was working from home, and they did an amazing job getting people working from home, but their own staff weren't set up for it, so they were less productive. So therefore, most of our existing clients wanted more resource from us. I think that was the first thing. Second thing was we got involved with a lot of organizations who just couldn't cope at all. So I think it was April, there was a 2-week period where we had to recruit, train, onboard and deploy 550 people, which we did. I certainly wouldn't recommend it as a weekly activity, but we did it, and we did it very successfully. So that was really good. I think the other thing that I've noticed, and it has to be said that I think virtually every organisation out there did an amazing job in that first month to 2 months of lockdown, and most businesses got about 80 to 90% of their staff home working from the contact centre. So what we saw was that happen. We saw the telephony and the technology was set up incredibly quickly, and most businesses were sort of saying to us, you know, they're done in a month what it would normally take their IT teams 1.5 years to do. So they did an incredible job. What we have seen though, and this is where a requirement for all of our services, whether it's BPO or technology or consulting, is that about 2 months into the whole lockdown process, whereas in the first period, there was a bit of a honeymoon period, you know, people were enjoying working from home. If you remember, the weather was lovely. It was April, May, the sun was out. You know, this isn't such a bad thing, not having to go into the office. So everything was all right, you know, and I think companies have done an amazing job. But 2 months in, and this continues today, actually, it continues to be more and more of a challenge, is that companies were saying to us they'd notice the honeymoon period was over, cracks starting to appear, motivation was dropping, mental health issues actually were starting to creep in, and all of that was affecting productivity and customer experience, etc., etc. So that's probably the overall high-level journey that we've experienced. I think there's a very big difference, it seems to me, from being able to work from home and then what we do, which is what I believe is true home working. So that's my view on it.
And I think that's a really interesting point, Mark. And I'd be really interested to explore, because I suppose when you talk about the movement there from being in the office to home working, having that sense of freedom and being able to do your drive the kids to the school and all those things. When you're not used to that, that becomes a really great activity to get involved with. And I suppose when you're recruited into a contact center, typically you're recruited into a seat. Within your industry, I suppose you recruit with that in mind, and you're recruiting for all those different dynamics. So how do you think that kind of, I suppose that culture has changed for, and any advice that you could give to organizations that have gone from not necessarily recruiting for home workers, but now having people almost forced into a home working situation that aren't necessarily feeling the benefits of it anymore?
Yeah. So, I mean, from my perspective, I think that's a brilliant question. It probably actually is the crux of all of the problems that organizations are currently experiencing. Everybody did that amazing job of getting everyone working from home, but those people originally applied to go and work in an office or in a contact center. So as our business, our BPO business at Sonse, we've got the luxury of having recruited everybody that chose to be a home worker and chose to work from home. So we haven't had those problems in terms of people not being suitable for home working. And so what I would say is that a large part of our strategic consultancy, you know, for a lot of the big high street banks, a lot of the big phone companies and energy companies, what we're doing with them now is looking at what the future is going to be like and what is the suitability for their existing employed workforce for home working. And across the board, it sort of seems, of all of the different survey work that we've done with those businesses, business as usual in 12 months' time is probably going to look like a hybrid model of some way, shape or form, where about 30 to 40% of those previously contact center based workers will become home workers. More than that, I think, is just not practical for all sorts of reasons that I'm very happy to go into. If you're recruiting specifically for home working, then of course 100% of the people are appropriate for it. But it seems to me it rests at about that 30 to 40%, which most organisations are baking into their plans in terms of the hybrid model. And some are going to have contact centre and home working. Others are going to have same workforce but coming in 2 days a week, working from home 3 days a week, etc. So different models for different companies. But that's the big challenge, is not everybody actually is right for home working.
I think you touched on a point, and I'm going to come to Warren Pickstone in a second with his question, but you touched on a point there, Mark, about maintaining motivation levels for staff in a remote setting. And I think I'd be interested in both yours and Joe's view on this, but I'm going to ask Warren to take yourself off mute and ask your question, if you don't mind, Warren.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I asked 2 questions, Gary. Sorry about that. The first question was really around managers within your industry, really, and how do you ensure, or have you picked up the qualities that make a good manager in this remote environment? I'm trying to find what I actually wrote. It probably came better across when I wrote it to you, Gary.
I'll remind you of your question, Warren. It was, which behavioural skill have you highlighted in your leaders and your managers that are critical to your ongoing and current business success?
Thanks.
So, who wants? Mark, should we come to you first, and then we'll come on to Joe?
Yep. So I've got my short-term memory is absolutely rubbish. So in terms of the issue around managers, Warren, jump in and correct me if I'm not answering your question. But as you can imagine, you know, when we're recruiting managers, we're looking for people who perhaps clearly have already expressed an interest in working from home. There's no surprise there. They tend to be a bit more self-sufficient. If you think about our agent and employee population right the way across the board, the average age of our employee is actually about 40, 41 at the moment, which means that you naturally get people who perhaps are not the typical contact centre profile. They tend to be more mature. They've had life experience, work experience in other sectors. So they tend to be a little bit less needy workers, if you like. So I think that's the first thing. In addition to that, we look out for those characteristics of self-reliance and perhaps a little bit more empathy, because they're going to have to work a little bit harder to communicate with their teams, etc. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that we use, and this is talking about the technology that I referred to earlier, we created a product, we call it Live Desk, that we've been sending out a lot over the last 7 months. But Live Desk is a true virtual collaboration tool. So people use it in the contact center and they use it when they're working from home. The experience is the same, but it means that managers and teams can have one-to-ones, face-to-face, side-by-side, hand in the air, questions asked, etc. Everything is recorded. Everything enables a really unified feel. So it doesn't matter where you're actually sitting, you get the same experience. But also, and I think it's very important, that enables the social interaction to happen as well. So it's not just work related. It's how managers can socialize with their teams. It's how the teams socialize with each other, either after work or speaking across the desk at work. So it's that unified collaboration tool, I think, over and above just the individuals, that really makes that happen and works really well. Did that answer the question?
I'll come to you, Joe.
Yeah, yes, he did. No, he did actually. I think what I was looking at there was, it's all right, people who work in the office contact center, but as soon as you sort of strip them out, particularly if you've got some people still back in the office and you've got these other people who are remote, it was just the challenges of that managerial style might not fit in that new environment. I was just wondering the workaround. I think your software is probably one of the solutions, but it's just making sure you get the right people in those positions.
I think there's an interesting point, Warren, and I think it'd be good to get Joe's perspective on this, and then we'll come to Joanna Hetherington for her question next. But I think from your perspective, Joe, clearly Mark recruits for people for those types of roles. You've been in a position where you've had to force your managers have had to force that change. So how is that differed in your perspective?
Yeah, so I think really good question, Warren. So I think, yeah, unlike Mark with all the home working, you know, we've gone from having a mix now. So the majority of all of our managers that were based, you know, in Birmingham and Redditch, you know, had to work at home, and then some of them have gone back. And then because, you know, like Mark said with his business, you know, we've been in a, you know, from Sigma, we've been really growing. So on average, we're recruiting, you know, around 150 employees a month. And when we're recruiting those managers, the operations managers, team managers and the agents, as an example, you know, we're having to say to them, you know, for the future, you know, for the next few months, you're going to be based at home, but then potentially we do need you to be able to go into Birmingham, as an example, whether that's to do with a laptop or to do some training or something like that. So I think it's, you know, for me, Warren, I think, you know, it's really important, the technology, and I think that, you know, the live desk that Mark talked about sounds brilliant. I think for me, a lot of it for us has been around the communication with the managers, because some managers as well, I mean, I'm sure you all do, but, you know, we do some really good surveys, monthly check-ins, you know, HR sessions, you know, and it's really around communications, because it's very easy when you've been used to working at home, working in an office, or if you're starting a new job, as an example, and you're working at home, it's very easy sometimes to feel quite, you know, perhaps lonely, and you miss that office buzz. So for us, you know, communication, employee engagement, along with, you know, making sure our leadership team are very visible, you know, has been really important for the managers, because it's okay people saying, as an example, yes, it's going to be great, I'm going to take this job, I'm going to be based at home as a manager, but perhaps in a couple of weeks' time that they have missed that being in an office. And you know, we all read about the percentages of people, me included, that do miss that. So I don't know whether that's answered that, hopefully, Warren.
Well, great stuff. Thank you, Warren. And I think from my perspective, some of the conversations I've had with managers who've come on some of the training courses that I've come on is that they struggle to think creatively about how to keep sessions engaging. So I think the best piece of advice is just talk to your peer group. I think there are some people that naturally warm to online and kind of have that charisma and have that ability to kind of draw a crowd in and kind of get them fired up. And there are other people that struggle. So talk to peers and share ideas and share what's working well. It would be one of my top tips. I'm going to come to Joanna Hetherington. You had a question for Joe. I think, Mark, you'll probably have some thoughts on this as well. But Joanna Hetherington, take yourself off mute and ask your question, please.
Thank you, Gary. What an absolutely fascinating conversation this is. My question was specifically around onboarding. So obviously in the current environment where you've got some companies who are 100% remote, onboarding is going to be handled in a different way. You know, you can't show people around the office, you can't introduce people to different departments, etc. And people don't make that, you know, that sort of human link like they would normally in an onboarding situation. So really the question is there specific, you know, tricks and tips for onboarding new employees from both the hiring manager and the new employees' perspective that you could share?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I think, you know, another great question. So if you think about, you know, in what we would have done previously, our USP as an example would have been, you know, we're close to Birmingham train station, you know, great social, you know, gatherings after work and everything like that. So, you know, and that would have been the USP, that we could attract people. So from an onboarding point of view, one of the things that we've tried to create, and I think we've done it, you know, we've done it well, we're getting good feedback, is we've created things like, you know, making sure that we send people, you know, as we're going through the recruitment process, lots of videos about, you know, what the office looks like, who the senior team is, who the team manager is going to be. We've engaged with them constantly. You know, we're regularly having welcome calls with all of our new employees. We assign HR to speak to them if they've got any questions. So again, it comes back to that really working smart and hard on, you know, how do we communicate, you know, with the people as part of the onboarding? Because usually if you're going to be working in an office, you'd go into the office, have your interview, but now we're doing it all online, and it's just people making sure that they've got those points of contact within the organization, that if they have any issues, and we do regular, I'm sure you all do, but surveys on how people are feeling and things like that. So I think we've had to, like all organizations, you just really look at everything we can to keep employees engaged as part of the onboarding in this new world? Because employees will say to me, because I often join the welcome calls, I'll say, how long do you think we're going to be working at home? And I'll say, do you know, I really don't know at the moment, but as soon as we know more, we'll let you know, type of thing. So I think for me, Joanna, it's really around that ongoing communication between operations and HR, and making sure that, you know, all the new starters and all the new people coming into the business have somebody to talk to, because people can feel quite lonely working at home.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Mark, as somebody who recruits specifically for remote managers and remote workers, do you have any builds on that as a question?
Yeah, I'm probably not very good at useful tips, but I think what we do as a business is we operate what we call a virtual mindset. So, you know, this isn't just an HR issue. This touches absolutely every part of the business. And therefore, all of the processes within the business have to be amended to be able to encompass that. And just to give you a bit of an explanation of what I mean, when we're recruiting somebody as a home worker, we're not just recruiting the person, we're recruiting their technology, because obviously they need good connectivity, they need good broadband, and that needs to be supported. So you need to have the ability to be able to respond to IT tickets really quickly, otherwise people get disenfranchised. But before you get to that stage, make sure they've got the kit, make sure they've got the right connectivity. Clearly, you need to make sure that you've got the right person. So, you know, there are all of the HR issues that sit around that in terms of how you go about that. And then you're also actually recruiting their physical environment. So whilst they're an employee working from home, that is their home environment. You've still got all of the legal and HR responsibilities and health and safety responsibilities for that individual at home. So the third element for us is we not only onboard their technology and the person, but we onboard their home office. Check it's got a window, check they've got a heater in there, check there's no cables all over the floor, check the window's not overlooking the screen for GDPR purposes, etc., etc. So it touches every single part of the business. And then in terms of bringing them on board, these are now going to be virtual workers. So there's no point having the same mindset thinking, well, you know, we'd ideally like you to come into the office for 2 weeks training and then you're back at home working from home for the next 6 months. So all of those processes have to change. And I think from our perspective, it is about communication. It's been said before, and Joe, you mentioned it, but we have a mantra which is overcompensate and over-communicate. So in a traditional recruitment drive, you may get somebody in for 1, perhaps 2 interviews. In our model, we take them through a 5 or 6 touch point interview process where you're constantly not only monitoring that individual, but all the background noise and all of that sort of stuff. So it allows you time to build up more of a rapport, more empathy. Obviously, the technology's got to be slick, and the platform that you enable them to work on needs to be appropriate for home working. But it really then is about that issue of communication, how you communicate with those individuals and how you keep them engaged and switched on.
Brilliant. I love that mantra, Mark. Overcompensate and over-communicate.
I said it the other day. So I said it to somebody yesterday, in fact, and they thought it meant they were going to get a pay rise. So
over-remunerate. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that question, Joe. I'm going to come next to Joe Chapman, who has a question around managers and how they're switching to remote working. So Joe, take yourself off mute and I'll let you direct your question. I think it was aimed at Joe.
Yeah, it was. Thanks, Gary. I was just curious about how different levels of management have coped with the switch to remote working. Just to give you the context, I've done some kind of research across organizations and noticed that middle management or team leaders that are much more hands-on potentially struggled a lot more with their role in a remote working environment. And I just wondered how that's playing out for you and how you're coping with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's interesting, Joe, because I think, you know, from our point of view, you know, when we're seeking feedback and when I'm working with our team managers and operations managers, as an example, you know, they're really enjoying working from home, you know, working with their teams. So I think the team managers and operations that I'm dealing with, you know, are really enjoying that working from home. And I think the senior team as well, and some of the senior people within the business, you know, I think they've adapted, you know, really well to working at home, because I think sometimes it's it's easy to forget that some of our employees have probably been working in an office for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden, you know, and I was thinking in preparing for this, you know, I think it's been about 7 months now when a lot of us have been, you know, used to working at home rather than going about our normal commute to work, etc. So for us at my organisation, you know, we found that the team have been really receptive. They've, you know, we haven't had any major challenges with the managers adapting to working at home. I don't know, you know, Mark, if you've got any more insight into that, but for us, Joe, as an organisation, I think it's been a really positive experience. And when I've asked people, you know, how much they've enjoyed it, I've always got really, you know, high scores on all the surveys that people have really enjoyed, you know, the opportunity and are getting used to it. I think my challenge from a HR point of view moving forward could be, dare I say, if we ever get to a new world, whatever that looks like, where I'm saying to people, fancy coming back into the office. I think some people will be saying, wow, I've loved it for 7 months, Joe, don't bring me back. So I think that might be my challenge.
Great. Brilliant.
Mark, any additional builds on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think our team leaders are a little bit like I was saying earlier on, they're perhaps a slightly different profile to a traditional team leader in a contact center environment, certainly in an outsourced contact center environment. And they tend to they tend to be a bit more mature. They tend to have more management experience behind them. They tend to be a little bit less needy. What I would say is that they've done an amazing job. The team leaders in our organisation really underpin absolutely everything that we do, and they're managed in a fairly light way. So they're perhaps in most organisations a kind of role between a team leader and an operations manager. So as a result of that, we do give them a lot of scope, and they have more scope perhaps in traditional contact centres to manage their teams depending on what particular client account they're working on. So we really empower them to do what's appropriate for them. What they've been doing through this whole process is really driving the performance and the quality of what they do out of our teams, and that is not just. And I think this is very, very important in a virtual environment. That's not just the work-based activity; it's the social activity as well. So they put a lot of effort into organising all of their own drinks, virtual drinks after work, virtual movie nights, virtual bingo. It just amazes me, all of the amazing different things that they have. And I've sat in on a lot of them. Some of them sound a bit naff, but actually they're fantastic, brilliant. You know, they get these things working in such a good way. We've got an amazing group of people. We've got all these budding DJs and musicians, and so I think it's that social element as well as the work element that really drives that forward. So I think that's probably the key thing I would point out. The other thing that we do is, in our organisation, we've always had to do it because it is a virtual organisation, is we survey every single member of staff every single week. And that's to make sure that, yes, the quality metrics, all the rest of it formally is being hit, but it gives us a really good touch point with all of the staff as to how they're feeling. Are they getting the hours they wanted to work? You know, are they getting all the right support, whether they're a manager or a team leader or whatever? So that's all part of that overcompensate, communicate mantra, you know.
Definitely. And I think there's a really good point that you've made there, Mark, around the role of the team leader and how much pressure is on that person now to kind of make sure that they're regulating themselves and regulating their own kind of temperature. I refer to it as a bit of a thermostat. They've got to be there to kind of take the pulse and the temperature of the team, but they've also got to be able to control their own emotions and kind of make sure that they're dealing with all the stuff that that comes their way. So it's a really big challenge for the team leader at the moment as they start to kind of adapt and change the environment. And that's certainly some of the feedback that I'm getting from some of the conversations that I've had, is that they struggle to sometimes find that balance. I'm going to come to Marianne Rutz next, and then we're going to go to Sam Provost. And I think, Marianne, if you fire your question, was it to Joe or Mark? I can't recall.
Hey everybody, I think my question is really directed to Mark, and I hope I'm really interested to hear. What I see a lot now, Mark, is that especially outsourced operations that were product-based, whether that is a retailer, a clothes shop, whatever, they tend to have these beautiful products in their contact center. They tend to create brand loyalty by way of having the feel and knowing what's out there new, etc. Now, in a home working environment, to bring that brand awareness and brand feel across, to me, in my experience, has proven quite difficult. And I'm kind of wondering, you know, you're bringing your own firm's values across, and you try to bring your clients' brand and values across to a home working agent or a home working manager. What's your experience there?
Yeah, so I think you probably start, and again, it's not very helpful for people who've had to start from getting their people working in a contact center and then send them home. But again, in our model, the way that we do this is because we've got the entire UK to recruit from, geography just isn't an issue. So what you stop doing then is you stop thinking about, can I get enough people to come and man my shifts? And you start thinking about, who would I ideally like to work in my contact center representing my brand? So whether it's an in-house or outsourced. And I think as we move forward and organizations get proper, what I would class as proper home working processes set up, you know, it stops you being so reliant on geography. And what you then do is we do it across all of our brands. We bring in people underpinned by, they don't flip across brands. They come in very specifically to work on that brand. So we bring in people who've got a real affinity, background, etc., with the brand they're coming into work on. So Bupa is one of our big clients. It's a medical healthcare insurance brand, as I'm sure you know. So the people we're able to access, the people that have they've perhaps been nurses, they perhaps have got an interest in medicine, whatever it is, but you could access the people with the right skill set right from day one. So you can bring in brand advocates who've already got a real desire to drive that product and understand the product, the brand and the image and the culture as well. So I think that's the first thing. It's getting the best possible team you can right from day one. I think secondly, it's about the training. So the training process has to start by using the technologies that they're going to be used to deliver the actual service, so they get comfortable with it. And you've got the opportunity to work, in our case, we work hand in hand with each client to exactly mirror and replicate their own in-house training, but we do it in a virtual environment. It's classroom based, but it's using technology very heavily, and it's designed to deliver the experience exactly as that particular brand or client would. And then of course, moving forward, it's then onto how it's managed. So you manage in the same way, you monitor all of the same issues and all the quality things that come through. I think where there is a reliance on something which is very hands-on, so it might be, you know, if it's selling mobile phones, for example, it's quite difficult in a virtual environment because you can't get an example of every phone sent to every household. So I think there are challenges there. But where possible, you know, if we've got products that we have to send up, we send stuff to people's houses so they can actually experience the product in that environment. And of course, the online tools that we have access to with all of our clients is very, very important to that. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour. But in terms of what I would say, actually, in most outsourced contact centres, I find one of the challenges around engagement, and engagement ultimately drives brand engagement. Most organizations have amazing programs of delivery for brand engagement, but Joe, it's probably not the same in your own organization, but certainly in previous outsourced organizations I've worked in, they have very, very high staff attrition, so 60 and 7% per year. How can you get engagement when you're turning over at least half of your staff on a 6-monthly basis? It's very difficult. So the other thing is, because we have such low staff attrition, ours is about 10% a year across the entire business. It means that you're retaining that culture, that brand awareness. So the longer you can hold on to your staff, the better that gets, I think.
People would kill for those attrition levels, Mark.
They would. I've written it down.
Well, they are.
We could run a whole other webinar on attrition now, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you.
They are. I think they are actually up to about 11% at the moment, but we're going through challenging times.
Joe, I'm going to come to you next, because some of the points that Mark was talking about in terms of training development were really key within that. And Sam has a question. Sam Provost has a question around learning development. So take yourself off mute, Sam, and fire your question to Joe. If you're struggling, I can ask it for you. That's not a problem. Give you 3 seconds. 1, 2. Has he done it? So Sam's question was, leading on from kind of some of Joanne's, how has learning development changed in the sense of delivering and keeping it engaging? So how has the kind of whole learning development platform changed since becoming remote?
Yeah, no, thanks, Sam. So you know, like as Mark just described, you know, all of our training is very much bespoke to each of our clients. So all of our training's got just different durations, etc. So we've had to go from that whole, you know, having the training and the fun in a classroom environment to now doing that all remotely. So, you know, we've still maintained all of that. You know, we've been recruiting large numbers of people, which is really good. And from a learning and development point of view now, you know, all of our trainers and our training team and our training managers, etc., are doing exactly the same type of training, but using tools, doing it online, doing it in rooms and everything like that. So, you know, I mean, we're still seeing, you know, a high percentage of people passing the training, enjoying it, giving us feedback. But that's been a huge learning curve for our training teams, who again are very used to being in that classroom. So I hope that's answered that, Sam.
I think just as someone who delivers training as well, Joe, I think from my perspective, it's forcing learning development teams to be more creative with the solutions that they're doing. I mean, using whiteboards, using Zoom rooms, like you say, kind of trying to kind of make it more interactive, more dynamic, and actually thinking about how you condense a full day's training into more bite-sized modules so you get that those greater levels of engagement.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there's a great question coming from Graham Bunting now, which kind of leads on to some of that technology around how people are using technology to keep teams integrated. So Graham, I'm going to let you take yourself off mute if you're not already, and fire your question to either Joe or Mark.
Hi everyone, thanks Gary. So full disclosure, I'm a complete technologist, love technology, but completely recognise that contact centres at the heart are all about people. I guess Mark was talking a little bit about some of the technology that he's introduced into play here, but the question I'm interested in, because I'm hearing every conversation that I'm seeing around technology invariably has Microsoft Teams at some point as part of that discussion. So I'm kind of wondering how, to what degree we're seeing Teams as a platform in use, as a collaboration and communication tool across the business, and how this fits into the frontline agents kind of paradigm, because I guess the last thing they want is lots and lots of technology. They want to be able to engage well with the customer. So it's very much about, you know, what are we seeing around things like MS Teams?
Do you want to go now?
Start with that one then, or no, Joe, you go ahead.
Okay, no, so thanks for that, Graham. So we use Microsoft Teams for almost everything, to be honest. So if we think about, you know, all of the recruitment now is done online, so we use Microsoft Teams for that. So, you know, we split people into groups in all the rooms, etc., to do briefings, to do the interviews, to do the eligibility to work. All of that's online, and then we're using that heavily as well for all of our training, as I've just described. And some of our training, as an example, can be 4 weeks. So that's a long time being online, as it were. And then to your point as well, we use it a lot for, you know, for our engagement sessions. So Mark talked about, you know, some of the great stuff his team are doing. So similarly, we're doing lots of, you know, whether it be a quiz or you know, all things like that. We've got a HR Halloween quiz as an example tomorrow. So, you know, we try and use Microsoft Teams for absolutely everything. And we also encourage people as well, if they want to use a video like Gary did at the start of this. So we're using it an awful lot, Graham, to be honest with you. I mean, I wonder what we'd do if I'm sure we'd use another provider, by the way, but we're using it for an awful lot. And also we're getting feedback from our teams all the time, you know, on how they're finding it and things like that. Because part of me also thought, when we're trying to do quizzes and bingo with people, etc., would they want to do it perhaps after work and things like that still on this? And they are as well. So, and I think during lockdown, employees as well, like all of us have, we've been communicating and keeping in touch with family members, friends with Microsoft Teams and Zoom and things like that. So I'm not sure whether it's just become part of life, to be honest, in the past few months, would be my thought, Graham.
Yeah, I guess sorry, I'll let Mark speak in a second. I was just going to say, one of the things that I'm also quite interested to understand is, are people beginning to see this type of technology as an interface tool out to customers as well? But I completely get what you're saying, Joe. It's absolutely become the de facto, a little bit like Zooms. People said I've been on Zooms all day, and now it's kind of a split between Zooms and Teams, right?
Yeah, no, and I think when I spoke to Mark a couple of weeks ago in Gary, you know, because Mark's organisation has been doing this for such a long time, you know, he's probably got lots of other technologies that they use, but our organisation, as an example, we use it because, you know, in March we had to get everyone at home, whereas Mark's business has always been at home. I think our business will absolutely change because this is the new norm, but I'm sure there's lots of other technologies that Mark could, you know, recommend or discuss and things like that. But for us, Teams has been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd add to that really is that I think companies have taken Teams and Zoom as far as it can probably be stretched. I think they've done incredible things with it. The end of the day, these tools were not developed for use in contact centres, and so we put a lot of demands on a contact center environment, whether that's social chat between agents, whether it's one-to-ones with team managers, whether it's floor walking, whether it's hands up around to get advice, whatever it is. Teams and Zoom are okay, but they don't really provide a solution for what I would call a unified contact center. So that's what I was referring to before. So our own advisors, I mean, we do use Teams, we do use Zoom quite a lot as a management team, but our contact center solution for our advisors requires far more than this. And so that's why we created that. We called it Live Desk, but we created that tool, and it enables all of the things that happen in a contact center to happen optimally, so that it's not a kind of second best make, do, amend option. You can use Teams as part of it if you want. That kind of clicks in and you can have that and you can open it up as you can with Zoom. But I think, you know, moving forward, I think a lot of the real difficult requirements that we place in a contact center environment need more than that. And that needs to be able to integrate with all of the workforce scheduling and planning tools, etc. So without that being too much of a sales pitch, at the end of the day, whether it's our own or very specialist technologies to enable that unified communication, I think we need more than Teams and we need more than Zoom.
Great question and great answer there, Mark. Thank you very much. And you feel free to plug away as the guest panelist. That's a right and a privilege. We've got two more questions in the bank. Going to come to Semico next, and then we've got one from I think it's Patrick Hargraves. So Semico, over to you. Fire your question to either Joe or Mark.
Yeah, hi. So actually, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, my first name's Daniela, by the way. And I'm in the dark here because I'm trying not to wake up my 2-year-old. I'm in California.
Thanks for dialing in from so far.
Yeah. So a quick question about home office equipment. Just, you know, wondering what people have felt is missing, what they've been asking for, what you've been having to buy so that they have a good home office.
It's a good question because most people have been a bit like myself from the dining room table. So do you want to, Joe, do you want to start as somebody who's kind of transitioned people from the office to home?
Yeah. So, you know, with us, you know, we provided, you know, well, we've done both actually. So, you know, we provide, you know, all of our employees with, you know, the laptop, the headphones and everything like that, all the PCs to be able to work at home. We also ask as part of that requirement that we see a photo of the employees, you know, where they're going to be working, to Mark's point earlier, to make sure that, you know, they're working in a safe environment and things like that. So, you know, we do all of that with people. We regularly check in with them to check all is okay with them working at home on the equipment and things like that. So, you know, I don't think, you know, I don't think that we've had many requests for people, as an example, for us to purchase any specific equipment. But, you know, equally, I know that some people have taken their chairs home or something like that, as an example, from the office. We've arranged that for them and things like that. But, you know, we have been, you know, when we recruit people and we know that they are going to be working at home, we do make sure that they, you know, we know that they've got a safe working environment. So we ask them to confirm all of that in as part of the interview and things like that, which we think is really important, you know. And again, when we all started out back in March doing this, you know, I don't think we really realised it was going to be for the full 7 months. So I think it's important moving forward, and I actually do sometimes think to myself, you know, as we head into 2021, if this is going to be ongoing for a really much longer time, will we get some of those questions that you've just asked about moving forward? Because, you know, sometimes I myself worry when I think, oh, are people, you know, are they sat okay? Are they on a chair? Are they on a stool? Whatever. So, you know, I think it's a good question to ask, and we just make sure as part of our recruitment and ongoing management that we're regularly checking in with them.
Question. Mark, from your perspective, are there any kind of bespoke equipment that you guys provide to home workers?
No, not bespoke. And we provide very, very little equipment in terms of what we actually ship out. So in terms of the desktop technology, for example, PCs, we operate a bring your own device, bring your own broadband operation. We find that reduces downtime by about 80 to 85%. If you make it the responsibility of individuals to have their own equipment working, as you would, you know, rely on your car to get you into the office, we see that the same with your desktop. But we do lock those desktops down. So when they log in with their virtual profile, we turn that effectively into a dumb terminal or a kiosk, so that it's very, very secure. So from a technology perspective, we don't provide any technology. Equally, we don't provide any office furniture, chairs, etc. But we do take our advisors through a very, very detailed HR onboarding process to make sure they've got a desk which is comfortable, the right sort of seat at the right height. I can't remember if I said it before, but every room has to have a window, it has to have heating, it can't have cabling all over the floor. If you're operating a clean desk policy and a no mobile phone policy, which you can in a home work environment, you obviously need to have sight of that desk through webcam. You need to make sure that there's windows, but they're not overlooking the screen, etc. So I think you can be very prescriptive. Our view is that, you know, the less that you can provide, you know, the less problems that you give to yourselves as a business. There are home working models. I know that the AA, for example, has run a home working model in the UK for 20 years, and they lift and shift and drop in absolutely everything. It costs them a fortune. I think it costs them about 20 grand per home office, and they have to ship it. And of course, every time a chair breaks, somebody calls back in and you've got a staff problem because they've got a broken chair. So our view is provide as little as possible, but to make sure it's of the standard it needs to be, so that people are comfortable and you're meeting with your health and safety obligations.
Thank you very much, Mark. We've probably got time for one last question now, and I think it's Patrick Hargrave. So if you take yourself off mute, Patrick, and fire your question to either Joe or Mark, that will be the last question of the day. So let's make it a good one.
Well, you'll be the judge of that, won't you? But yeah, so I'm really interested in creative problem solving. So as we bring the teams into the whole world of making a difference to continuous improvement, would have been doing a lot in the contact centre around the whiteboards with post-its, and you'd see the whites of everybody's eyes. There are limitations with Teams and so on, and yeah, I was wondering what people have been doing. We've been using Miro. I don't know if other people have used Miro. We found that really, really good, but I'm just curious what other people have used.
Mark, should we come to you first for that?
Yeah, well, that's probably, other than me doing another sales pitch on our live desk technology, I've probably already answered that one. I think you need to have technologies that are specifically developed for this purpose, and that enable agents to have the social interaction, side-by-side interaction, across the desk interaction, obviously interaction whilst they're on screen or on call to your customers, obviously one-to-one interaction with their managers and coaches, and then all of the social stuff outside of that. So we think that you need a platform that enables that to happen in a seamless way. I don't think there is another one that does it other than Live Desk, and we created it. And we created it about well over the last 16 years, but we created it because it didn't previously exist. Now I know Microsoft are doing some really clever stuff, and Genesis are trying to get into the game, and so there's a lot of stuff happening, and you will all be bombarded with lots and lots of different technology tools. There are very few, I think, complete unified contact center technology integration tools that exist out there. But if anybody wants to have a look at ours or talk to me about Live Desk, as we call it, I'm very, very happy to share with people afterwards.
So thank you very much for that question, Patrick, and thanks for that, Mark, and thanks very much, Joe, for your contribution as well. Really, really great discussion points here. Thanks everybody for the questions. Just to wrap up today's session, I'll quickly share my screen again, just to give you some useful dates that are coming down the line for the next few kind of sessions that we've got. So save the dates. So we've got a webinar that I'm co-hosting with the guys from Avwara, who look at quality assurance and how you can use speech analytics to improve your customer experience. So if you're available, join me for that on Tuesday the 10th at 10 a.m. And then the next Contact Center Network event will be on the 26th of November. That'll be the final one for the year, because we're not going to be running one in December. It's just going to take a break because I think everybody needs it. And if you'd like to join the Contact Center Revolution on LinkedIn, there is a QR code there which you can scan, and that will take you into the LinkedIn group that I created, where people can kind of share useful hints, information, useful links, useful posts for anybody in the contact center industry. And if you do want to speak to me about anything around what I do as Fab Solutions, be it process improvement, contact center training, or leadership development, my details are there. Please feel free to connect on LinkedIn and say hello. The last thing for me to do remains to be said, just to say absolutely a million thank yous to Mark and Joe for their kind of really great contribution here. Thank you to everybody who has asked a question and given an hour of your time to kind of listen and hear what has to be said. It's a really tough environment out there, and I think we're all working incredibly hard to pull together and to make things work for the benefit of our customers and